Hi, good morning, and a warm welcome to all of you who have joined the webinar. I can still see some additional people joining in, and we'll give them a few seconds to get on the audio and hopefully be able to hear the webinar without any issues. Let me go ahead and get started, and let me make sure that you're seeing my presentation mode. So today's webinar is titled, "So your Kanban board is working, now what?" And this is the first part of a three-part series that we planned for getting to better predictability with Kanban. This is a webinar that's based on our conversation with literally hundreds of teams and their implementation of Kanban, as well as Swift Kanban in many cases, and their experience in terms of getting from ground zero to a certain level with the practice of Kanban, and then their journey beyond that first phase. So hopefully you'll find this webinar very useful given your own implementation of Kanban, and many of you I know are also using Swift Kanban. Many of you might be using other Kanban tools, but hopefully all of you will find this a useful webinar. Let's get started with some initial housekeeping and introductions, etc. And hopefully in the meantime we'll have many more people joining in as well. So I'll go ahead and introduce today's main guest that I have, with whom I'll be chatting. I'll give you a quick introduction to Digité and Swift Kanban, and then we'll get on to the main part of the conversation, look at what are some of the typical experiences of a Kanban team, and then how you can get better results with Kanban. And at the end of it, we will throw it open for Q&A to address questions that you might have based on your experience with implementation of Kanban. And hopefully we will have a good lively discussion. Just to let you all know, this webinar is being recorded, and we will make the recording available to all of you after the webinar is done. We will take the questions via the Q&A box that you will see on the right side of your screens in the GoToWebinar panel. What I will try and do though is that depending on the question and how much time we have, I will try and give you the mic so you can talk about, you can actually ask your question live. But go ahead and ask the question first in the Q&A box so we can take the questions in the sequence in which they get asked. All right. So with that, let me introduce you to our main speaker, Dr. Ramesh Patil. He's the CTO for Digité, and he's a Kanban coaching professional. I'm Mahesh Singh, and I'm currently responsible for marketing and consulting at Digité. And I'm also a trained Kanban coaching professional and an accredited Kanban trainer. So both of us have spent a lot of time with our customers, understanding their initial challenges with Kanban or training them on Swift Kanban. And through the last so many years, we've gathered a lot of experience on what teams go through when they're using Kanban, or when they're starting to get off the ground with Kanban. And this really is a abstraction of that, so to speak. Just a little bit more about Ramesh. He has over 30 years of experience as an academician, entrepreneur, and technologist, and he's really been the driving force behind the Swift Kanban and Swift TSP, and has probably one of the best analytical minds that I've seen, and his grasp of the various metrics and analytics of and the general concepts of Kanban are just amazing. And also his academic background helps him be a perfect person to teach some of the concepts that we've learned as part of our journey with Kanban. He's of course also been a pioneer in the field of artificial intelligence and its application to medicine. He's a fellow of the American Association for Artificial Intelligence and American College of Medical Informatics, and he served as a faculty at MIT and at USC as well. So Ramesh, welcome to you. I will give you the mic in a bit. Let me just quickly go through the quick introduction to Digité for those of you who may not be familiar with us too much. We have been a pioneer in web-based applications in the lean agile space for many, many years. We are headquartered in Cupertino, California. So we like to say that Apple is in our backyard. And the new spaceship of design office is coming up right down the road from us. So we kind of wait with dread about the traffic that is going to be caused once the office is fully open. We have actually over 750,000 users of our products across the world. And of course, like I said, our products cover Lean Kanban, Agile Application Lifecycle Management, and Project Portfolio Management. And of course, Sukumars is our flagship Lean Kanban product. Just a quick word about Swift Kanban. So a majority of our customers tend to be IT and software folks. Probably about 60 to 70% of our customers, or maybe a little more actually, are folks who do software and IT and use Swift Kanban for that. But our software has also been used for a variety of other functions, including marketing, procurement, HR, legal, sales, and just a variety of other functions. So you can certainly use Swift Kanban for multiple business functions within your organization. It's also a great tool for personal Kanban, and we have, in fact, several of our users who use it for personal Kanban and for personal organization. A number of them use Swift Kanban in combination with the getting things done, the GTD methodology. And in fact, we have a couple of templates that are available out of the box for handling such personal Kanban situations. One of the sort of key strengths of Swift Kanban are some of the analytics that we provide. We've really done I believe, a fairly comprehensive job of covering the Kanban model and the variety of sort of measures that it espouses, and we've put those in the product, and that's one of the reasons why our customers like Swift Kanban. And so we just have a fair amount of capability there. And just the last slide here on some of our key customers. We have got customers all over the world, like I mentioned earlier, and users around the world as well, using it for a variety of these purposes. So with that, I'm going to start with the main part of the presentation. Ramesh, welcome to you.
Hi, thank you.
All right. So I somehow seem to be having trouble with my presentation mode for some reason. So let's get going with what is the level at which you are today in your Kanban journey? So how deep is your Kanban? And what are some of the things that teams experience when they go through implementation of Kanban? And what are some of the things that they can look forward to as they continue their journey? So the question that we will discuss in today's session. Before that, let's go ahead and ask this poll question that we had for all of you. So if you could just take a few seconds to respond to this poll. Okay, looks like we have most of the people who voted. We'll give it a couple of more seconds and then let's share the results of the poll. Okay, let's close it out. So there you go. Hopefully you can see the results of the poll on your screens. So as you might expect, the biggest number of people who are using Kanban in their organization use it within IT ops and DevOps on the one hand, and application development or engineering or product software development is what I would say. But certainly there is a fair bit of usage in other functions, especially product management and program management and other business functions as well. Right. So let's just close that out and let's continue with the presentation here. So some of the questions that we will take up today and the point that we will discuss, and hopefully a lot of this will resonate with you, and you'll relate to it. And we discussed the specific aspects of each of these that you go through at the different stages of implementation of Kanban. So what are some of the key benefits of Kanban that teams aim for or should aim for? And we'll have a little bit of conversation around that. How does Kanban help you initially in improving your team's performance? So most of the time, like I said, the team start from ground zero and they reach a certain level of maturity and usage of Kanban. And at that stage, they get a certain level of benefit from Kanban. What are those, and what happens beyond that? That's really the main aspect of today's webinar. In relation to some of the initial metrics that you use, there is a widely discussed law that is used in Kanban, that is the Little's Law. We'll talk a little bit about what is the significance of Little's Law and how you should think about it as part of using Kanban. And also talk a little bit about some of the initial challenges that you might have in modeling Kanban boards. So that's sort of the first half of the session today. And once we've gone through it, then we can look at what are some of the other, you reach a certain level of usage and maturity with Kanban. Many teams tend to stagnate. There is probably the right word to use. They reach that level and they believe perhaps that the benefits of Kanban have already been achieved, and sometimes they miss out on some of the deeper benefits of Kanban. And we'll talk a little bit about what are some of the other aspects of Kanban that you can use, and then how can you use some of the key metrics that are available to improve your reliability and predictability, which is one of the key sort of benefits of what teams seek to get from Kanban. And finally, look at how you can maximize delivery of value using Kanban. Ramesh, any thoughts here? Anything you want to add here?
Keep going.
All right. So let's go with the first point, which is key benefits of Kanban. So what are some of the things that teams expect to get when they start using Kanban? Let me just go ahead and build out the slide here, and we'll talk a little bit about it. So obviously, one of the biggest benefits that teams expect to get, and of course get immediately as they start to use a Kanban board, is the benefit of visualization. We'll talk a little bit about that. The second aspect of it, one of the most popular sort of metrics of Kanban is lead time or cycle time, and teams expect to get reduction in the lead time as they start to use Kanban, and to be able to get faster to delivery of the services and products, and get faster to reduce the time to market, so to speak. Also, there is an expectation, and there is the experience of getting an increase in throughput and velocity, and therefore being able to do more with the same amount of resources that you have, and to do them faster based on the use of some of the key principles of Kanban. So these are some of the initial benefits that teams experience and are able to get. One of the big things that Kanban talks about is the limiting of work in progress, so implementing WIP limits and really abiding by them. And as a result of that, there is certainly for teams that do it well, there is a certain amount of reduction in multitasking that they're able to achieve. Team members focus on finishing what they've started, and only then taking on new work. And as a result of that, there is an improved flow that they get to experience on their work. Whatever might have been the typical performance in terms of finishing, taking up new work and finishing it, they are able to get an improved amount of flow from the work that they do based on their Kanban boards. And as a result of that, again, depending on the context of your work, sometimes this might be more important than at other times. You're able to sort of continuously work on things and deliver them. And if you're in a software situation, you're able to deploy this work onto your production servers. If you're in a marketing or legal function, you're able to continuously deliver services to your stakeholders, and you're able to get these benefits of being able to control your amount of work that is being done at any point in time and finishing what you do. And because of these key sort of factors that you experience, there is a certain amount of improvement in predictability, because now you're able to see the work, see the flow of work. You're able to say, okay, this is how soon it takes for me to complete my work, and therefore you're able to get to higher levels of predictability. That's really what you're trying to do. And of course, for folks that are from the software world, there is a widespread, of course, appreciation of Kanban as an alternate path to agility, because now you're exhibiting all of the traits of agile teams in terms of delivering software faster, more often to the market, getting faster feedback, and being able to adjust and course correct if needed for making sure that the software or the end product meets the requirements of the customer. And that's really been some of the sort of biggest sort of factors driving the agile movement. So Kanban is considered to be an alternate path to agility. These are some of the key benefits of Kanban that teams start out with looking for, and many of them get it in their first sort of level of Kanban. Ramesh, I know you've spoken many times to many customers of ours. Have you do these resonate with you, and have you seen some others that you'd like to talk about?
I think we should take these up as we go along. I think there is significant challenge in achieving predictability, and that's one of the things that's really key to business owners. So let's get down in details, and then we'll discuss that more.
All right. So how does Kanban help in the initial stages of implementation in a team? So firstly, like I said earlier, one of the biggest benefits that teams seek and pretty much get, and that's sort of the initial big win for most Kanban teams, is the whole aspect of visualization. A picture is worth 1,000 words, and what teams are able to get as a result of having put up their Kanban boards is stakeholder visibility. So in terms of being the work that every team is doing, in terms of that work being visible to the team itself, as well as to its downstream functions, there might be other teams that are dependent on this team's work, or its customers, they are able to get just a completely new level of visibility that they did not have earlier. And as a result of that visibility, they are able to get a far greater level of understanding of what the team's work is, what their current loading is, and that clearly gives them so I would say unprecedented levels of collaboration that they did not experience till now. So Kanban's initial usage, the using of a Kanban board, takes the team into a sort of a new realm of possibilities, so to speak, of how they can work, how they can interact with their customers, with their suppliers, with other peers, and it just completely changes the sort of paradigm of how work can be done, and it results in an initial improvement of the overall environment, including collaboration. And some of the things that drive this is, some of the factors that are seen, some of the ways that you can probably relate to it yourself, is that you have the Kanban board set up, the team is getting used to the visualness and sort of really loving it. While Kanban talks a lot about pull, and many teams are able to do it, there is still some initial getting used to the concept of pull, and so we've seen that many teams perhaps don't really get to pull. They may still be using a manager role, so to speak, or some sort of a senior role that helps in assigning work. Firstly, identifying the work that needs to be done, and then perhaps assigning it to the right person to be doing it on the team. In addition to the usage of the the tools that Kanban provides in terms of the Kanban board and in terms of some of these practices, some of the cadences around using Kanban also start to get quite settled, and certainly the daily stand-up is probably the most popular meeting that becomes part of the rituals of the team and becomes the basis where all of the work gets discussed in the Kanban team, and based on that, other actions come out of there. One of the things that we have seen is that while the Kanban board itself becomes quite used, and of course everybody goes through their own level of how they update the Kanban board. Some teams are really good at it. Some teams perhaps need a little bit of pushing and prodding to update the Kanban board, make sure that cards are being pulled and moved at the right time. Sometimes we've heard that these might be done on a twice or thrice per week basis. Some teams, of course, will do daily. In addition to that, a few metrics start to definitely get used and tracked quite regularly and with a fair bit of discipline. And some of the other key practices start to get in place. So clearly, the limiting of WIP is a big part of implementation of Kanban. Sometimes team may struggle with how to define the WIP limit, and there is many thought leaders who've spoken about this. Many people have written about it as to how to define your WIP limit, and maybe we can discuss that as part of our talk today. But the whole concept of implementing WIP limits in order to push this Kanban's agenda of stop, starting, start, finishing. This is a picture that we've taken from Anirukh's famous book on the same with the same title. It helps them to reduce multitasking and improve flow. That's certainly a big part of the initial implementation of Kanban. And in addition, a few metrics, like I mentioned, start getting used. So the cumulative flow diagram becomes, is actually a big initial metric that most teams track, which is probably the best indicator of how the work is getting completed across and how work is moving across different stages of your Kanban workflow. And it, like as it says on the screen here, it gives you an idea of some of the key data that you want to track as part of your Kanban implementation. In addition to so let me just pause here for a second. Ramesh, you want to talk a little bit about how the cumulative flow diagram helps team in looking at its overall.
Okay, so let's first start by saying how it is constructed. Okay, so every day midnight, you record the work in progress or number of cards in each queue or column, and also record the number of cards that were completed. So the bottommost region, which is the blue one shown here, is the work completed, and every different color band above it is the WIP of a queue going from right to left. Okay, now this one single chart effectively is visualizing the entire flow for a period of time. The things very clearly is between the blue and the top is the number of cards you have in your system. So WIP or work in progress is the height of the distance, height between the bottom and the top of the chart. The horizontal distance between the top and the bottom is really the turnover time, which is how long did basically your inventory turnover. It is approximately same as lead time, but not exactly. And the reason is that the cards don't necessarily leave in the same order they come in. Okay. And again, if you have questions, we can go on to it, discuss this further. The slope of the blue region is basically your throughput or burnout. Okay, and that's the rate at which you're completing, and in a reasonably continuous flow scenario, that rate is fairly predictive of how future completions will happen. Okay, let's continue from here, because one can sit at the beauty of this particular chart is that just by looking at this one chart, you could pretty much figure out everything that's going on in the system, and so we could spend talking all the time over here and not see the other views of the world. So let's go forward, and we'll refer to this from time to time.
Sure. I like to call it sort of the most comprehensive picture that a team gets of its system, both in terms of the overall combination of things that a team does. Many times it is easy to forget that the team not only works on new or value demand in terms of new user stories or enhancement, but also working with defects and issues and so forth. So it's a comprehensive picture of all of the work that you do, and it's a comprehensive picture of all of the team mix that you have in terms of skills, experience, etc. And it gives you a complete picture of what your team is capable of doing in terms of the overall type of work that it does. All right. So clearly, the CFD is a big part of the initial Kanban implementation. The other thing, of course, that gets a lot of attention is the cycle time. So you're measuring how much time it takes for cards to go across the board, and you're trying to see how you can help reduce that. This is a picture that I'm showing you from our own initial implementation of Kanban, and when we started to use Kanban internally. And as you can tell, we actually got a dramatic benefit in terms of our overall cycle time reduction. We went from approximately 12 weeks, which is the sort of the rough value here, all the way down to 3 weeks. And the initial impact of the use of Kanban was huge for us, and it was, I guess, a eye-opener in terms of the way that we ourselves work. I'll just show you a quick picture of how it looks today, and this is actually a picture from July of 2017 to December 2017. So it gives you a complete picture of what the cycle time looks like for us right now in terms of the total cycle time, which is the gray line at the top, and then breaks it down into work time, wait time, and we also show you the block time. This is, of course, a screenshot from Sukumars' average cycle time chart. The good thing about this chart is that while it doesn't give you the average cycle time has its challenges in terms of the way that you can sort of interpret it, but I think what it does is gives you a good overall trend of how your cycle time is trending, how is it moving. And if you're plotting your cycle time on a regular basis, then you should be able to see over a fairly short period of time that you have whether your situation is improving or getting worse, and of course, if it is getting worse, you want to have a conversation with the team to say why that may be happening. So one of the big things, Ramesh, which sort of affects some of the thinking around how you look at cycle time and how you interpret it and how you look at your throughput, etc., is the whole theory around the Little's law. And it gets talked about a lot in the Kanban community. I'm not sure that it's a very widely understood law. So I think a great idea for you to talk a little bit about what is it and how teams should think about it.
Yeah.
So let me just go ahead and do that.
So simply stated, roughly 40, 50 years ago, people had no idea in the queuing world, queuing systems, how to forecast the number of people waiting in a queue, and they didn't believe that there was any relationship till a bunch of papers came out roughly around the same time, and Little's is the proof that there is a relationship and what that relationship is. And if you look at Wikipedia, the first formula, L equal to lambda W, is straight taken out of Wikipedia. And I'm using the terminology used in operations research or queuing theory. L is the average number of customers in the store, which is the same as one would say WIP. And that WIP includes both the browse and pay. In queuing theory, queue and the service is generally paired together. Lambda is effective arrival rate at which customers are entering the store. And W is average amount of time or lead time people are spending in the store. So this is all looking at the queuing system as a black box from outside. Okay, and stated differently, the same in Kanban term is that average WIP is the average cycle time multiplied by the throughput. Or if you want the cycle time, it's WIP over throughput, right? So effectively, what this formula is saying is there is a relationship with the work in progress and cycle time given a certain capacity to complete work. Okay?
Okay.
And the remarkable thing about Little's proof is that it is independent of the distribution or distribution, statistical distribution of the arrivals. They could be episodic, they could be continuous, I mean, smooth, Poisson distribution, whatever it be, doesn't matter. And it is independent of the average or the distribution of how long it takes to service a customer. In spite of that, the law holds. Can you go to the next slide? The key to that formula proof is that the average WIP, average throughput, etc., are computed over infinite period of time. Okay? So it's the complete picture. And secondly, that it is a stable system, which means that the system, if I took, say, 6 months or 3 months or 1 month or 1 day of the data, and I looked at another one of these same periods, the statistical nature of the process doesn't change. It's a stationary, stable system. Okay. Both of these assumptions turn out to be challenging in practice. However, even when these assumptions are not met, okay, the relationship between the WIP cycle time and throughput in terms of proportion, in terms of, when the WIP goes up, the cycle time will go up if the throughput stays same kind of thing. Directionality of the relationship holds over a very wide distribution, very wide range of situations, let's say. So the key is that the relationship exists and there are challenges in measuring it. Now, what we want to know is and this is queuing theory has very clearly been obsessed with this problem for a very long time, and they have understood that one can only measure over a finite window or fixed window of time. So let's go to the next slide. So here is my system. Each horizontal bar represents a piece of work, a customer or a card coming in. And what I am able to look at is between time T0 and T1. That's the yellowed out. And that's the range of time I'm measuring. Time after T1 is in the future, so obviously you have no idea. And time before T0 may be in the past that you don't have access to, or perhaps you do have access to. Okay. Right. So now we need to estimate the cycle time, average rate, arrival rate. Oh, by the way, going back, I forgot to state one fact. Okay, that the formula that you saw from Little's law was effective arrival rate. Okay, it's the effective arrival rate. That's the rate at which we are coming in. And what is stated in the Kanban rule is effective throughput. that is effective rate at which the cards leave the system. Okay. Now, why are these two equal? They are equal because if you work over a long period of time and you have more customers coming in than they can leave, at some point the store will overflow. Or effectively, the queues will build up to infinity. And that's not a practical situation. So in order for system to be viable over a long period of time, somehow the in and out must match. And therefore arrival rate, average arrival rate, or total arrival rate and total departure rate or average departure rate should be balanced. And that tends to be a situation that almost always holds in any system that is capable of running over a long period of time. And that's why we can apply the same rule in Kanban, where we are looking at departure rate rather than arrival rates. So let's look at the challenges in working with finite interval. If you look at the top area, we are seeing cycle time, or for that matter, even throughput. The orange cards are the cards that are involved, that are used in calculating average cycle time or average throughput. Okay, and if you look at the second chart, the green cards are the ones, and the reason why they are used in cycle time is those are the cards that finished in my time interval, and therefore I know how long they were in the system because they finished their work. So I have a place where I can say, or throughput, because they were completed, they participate in the throughput calculation. The green area in the second chart shows all the cards that arrived while we were in that time period. Some completed, some may not have completed. The average WIP is a somewhat more complex calculation, and that really, if you look at the WIP at any given time, WIP is a point in time measure, which means that black line in the middle is the time t at which the WIP is 5. That means there are 5 cards that cross that line. However, when we want to calculate average WIP, what we have to do is we have to time weight the point in time WIP, or in other words, it's the total blue area divided by the total time. Okay?
Right.
So average WIP is the total amount of time spent by all the cards divided by the time in that. So if the WIP was 5 for 2 minutes, you would say 5 is 2. If it was 7 for 4 minutes, you would say 4, and so on, and average the weighted sum. Okay? So the key here is we are using these measures and applying Little's law, and the reason, but the fact is that because of limited time horizon, the set over which the measurements are being taken are all different, and that's one of the reasons why it is difficult to literally apply Little's law to the measurements we see. The other fact you will also notice that the cycle time is, and cycle time is similarly applies to flow efficiency as well, is a backward-looking measure. Note also that there is this huge white line, white card area in sort of near the bottom in the cycle time, just above A, B, and C. You see, that's a card that's been sitting. Yeah, that card has been sitting in the system for a long time. It came before and hasn't left yet, but if you notice the cycle time, it is not participating in the average cycle time. At this point, it will only participate it when it's completed. And when it is completed, you will have a very large number in that set. And that's what tends to make the cycle time, when you saw the chart that Mahesh was showing earlier, that cycle time goes up and down. And that's just because it happens to have some cards that took a long time to finish. It's not necessarily that your process suddenly got bad. So when we take cycle time averages or plot cycle time series over short intervals, one needs to be cognizant of the fact that occasionally you will get a spike, and the spike, it results from some long-standing intangible work being completed, and so you need to track the cycle time, but also be flexible enough not to suddenly get alarmed and make changes for what turns out to be artifact of the measurement. Let's continue.
Okay. I was just going to ask that, there is a lot of aspects of the cycle time, the Little's law that is sort of implicit in the way that we think about these various measures. Are teams expected to think about this and sort of use it as a basis for their calculations, or use this as a way to understand system behavior?
I think Little's law is to be used as an axiom of faith more than anything else, and it may sound a little strange, but it's a law that applies to the underlying physical system when you think of Kanban board as a queuing system. So right. Therefore, if you reduce the width, okay, let's say we are able to hold the throughput, same throughput, okay, and we have reduced the work in progress. Mm-hmm. It tells you that by reducing the work in progress, I will get improvement in my cycle time.
Correct.
Okay. However, the way the cycle time is being measured, you may see the improvement right away, you may see the improvement later, and sometimes you may feel like you're slipping because some old cards that have been sitting there for a long time just happen to get completed. Right? However, it's a law of physics. Therefore, you're improving. So you have to be kind of, understand the fact that there are going to be variations in your cycle time, and then go look at them to make sure that there's a reason why it went up, not because of my current work, but because of some debt I had from before. So the relationship holds, and that relationship conceptually is the guiding principle towards optimizing your system.
Adjusting your system, I was going to say. Absolutely. So there's in fact a question from one of the attendees that it would be nice to see an example with numbers in a scenario of Little's law practically applied. I don't know that we have something that we can show here, but we can certainly take that offline.
So if you go into Wikipedia or literature, I mean, Little's law is applied everywhere from queuing theory, computer networks, and so on and so forth, everywhere. And there are like thousands of publications that talk about practical measurements based on that principle. The problem really is, and I have tried very hard to show in a working Kanban system the relationship between the three, but because of this bounded time measurement, the straightforward application doesn't quite bring out visually impactful relationship, and to get the data to work right requires significantly more complex mathematical models of corrections, which in practice are not necessary. If you understand the principle, you can apply it and take advantage of it.
All right. So with that, let's go to another part which is very intriguing for most teams as they go through their initial Kanban board designs, as to what are some of the sort of aspects of Kanban board design, especially in terms of the way that you lay out your workflow stages to assist the pull mechanism as you handing off work from one stage to the next. So let's just jump right into that topic and see if you can quickly talk about that as well. We are at about 45 minutes, so we are probably running a little behind. We might run a little late, so to all of you who are on the webinar, I hope you can stay with us as we go through this discussion.
So the point is, generally one starts out by modeling whatever they have, okay? And if you look at the Kanban write-ups and all kinds of things, what you find is the scenario one is the personal Kanban, to do, doing, done.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Now when you extend it to multi-stage flows, people tend to do, doing, done, doing, done, doing, done. Now it's psychologically nice to see done, but really what's important is for any given work to know what's waiting for the work rather than what has been completed. So in queuing theory, you will notice that the buffer is always before the queue. If you go to any store or Disneyland or whatever, people walk to where they want to get service. They don't wait when they finish getting service. Same way, if we put to do, doing repeatedly, then what happens is that to do column is literally the amount of work that's waiting to be done. And this becomes important when your flow has some skip states. If they had no skip states, the two are same. But if you had skips, then you want cards to be waiting just in front of where it is done, so that when you visualize, you understand what is the work pending at each state. And also, it impacts the way you compute your metrics, especially if you group these to-do doings into a hierarchical column structure where they are, like design, waiting for design, doing design, develop, waiting for develop, doing develop, and so on, right? So that's basically an idea. This is generally pretty close to just relabeling your workflow and making sure people move the cards when they're done to where they need to get processed next. Very minor change, but can have significant impact in your accuracy of your visualization and metric communication as well as metrics.
Right.
Next. Okay. So one of the things about WIP, and we really should talk about WIPs. The thing is, when you have a buffer with an infinite WIP, okay, what it does is no matter what the flow is before and no matter what the flow is after, this buffer basically decouples the flow, right? And so this is really a bad practice if you have a single team working on a continuous thing like design, develop, test, release, right? One shouldn't have an infinite buffer in the middle. Mm-hmm. On the other hand, if your testing is done, but then you do batch releases, and that batch release depends on external factors, not you, then you do want to put an infinite buffer because you keep continuously working and producing cards that are ready to be shipped, and it's somebody else's job to pull things out of it and ship it. So it is a place, infinite buffer is a place where at the interface, the continuous part of the flow meets the batch process of the flow. And you may still want to put some WIPs there in order to make sure that the batch, you're not accumulating infinitely and so on. But the concept of infinite is applicable in those cases. And you will normally notice backlog and ready, as well as at the end done and what goes next are usually infinite buffers. And so next, let's go to the next one. Okay, now another pattern that is of interest is two buffer columns next to each other. The place to use this particular idiom is where you have, let's say I have a design team or development team, and I have a separate QA team. The development team will keep doing its work and get done, and they put their cards in their out stack, which is the done column. Mm-hmm. But as soon as it is done, doesn't mean that the QA is going to take it up. QA takes it up when they pull into their workflow. So when you have two buffer column, the move from one to the other is a decision point or selection point. So similarly, between backlog and ready, there is a grooming process that goes on. There is a selection, process that goes on. Here, between done and ready, one team is finished, the other team is now committed to taking up the work. And particularly if you have teams that are managed by different people and are measured by different lead times, then this allows the QA team to say, from the time we took the work on, here is how long it took, not the time from when the previous guys were done. So this also allows metrics to be segregated so that each team is measured on its own terms. So that's that pattern.
The ready column works as the commit point for the next team.
Basically, between when they're buffer and there's a line in between, there is some sort of decision being made, and generally that is a commitment decision.
Right. So would you
basically ETVX?
So would you recommend that teams define these two buffer columns next to each other, especially when, like you said, there are different sets of people being different sets of people managing the function and are measured by the work that they do?
Right, and if you want to put those two teams onto the same value stream, then this is actually a good way of reducing the friction between the teams.
Right. Great. This is excellent. Actually, this is a discussion that comes up quite often when teams are designing their Kanban boards and then working to improve the way that they manage work as it goes across in order to get better measurements out of it, as well as to just manage their work better. We have seen some very large customers with very long workflow, especially in their IT infrastructure, DevOps type of functions, where each team gets measured based on how they provision systems and how they test them, how they make them ready, etc. And each of the teams can be very picky about how when should the clock start for them. And right. I think that this is exactly what this deals with.
So Mahesh, before we proceed to the next section, let's talk a little bit about what the benefits, some of the benefits of the visualization. One of the key differences you will find between a Kanban board and a traditional, workflow system. In the workflow system, all the work steps or value steps are identified, and the work moves between those value steps. In Kanban, each value step is further broken down into waiting and working. Okay? What this does is, firstly, you know how much pending work is there and how much work is getting done. However, remember, we have been chartered not to multitask, right?
Right.
What other way to think about a waiting column is, if I have a resource working somewhere on some card and it goes into a buffer, done, there is potentially a handoff to a new person. It may be, it may not be. Same person may go to the next place and service the same thing. But the key here is that is a point at which the unit of work has been completed as far as this resource is concerned. And so he or she can go on to do other things. That's the point where you can reprioritize your work if, as we'll talk immediately in class of service area, where you can, switch what you prioritize to work on without actually getting into multitasking situation and losing productivity. So one other thing that Kanban allows you to do is be very dynamic about how you prioritize. And in the next seminar, we will talk about the consequences of doing that. But that allows a much finer control over prioritization of work.
Absolutely. In fact, there is another related topic that I've heard David Anderson talk about and other speakers as well, is this whole aspect of the two-phase commit that Kanban lets you design into the way that you work, and makes it easy for both customer and the delivery team to be in sync, I guess, to be in agreement about when does something get committed, when does it need to be taken up by the customer, when the customer is ready to take it up, and how do you in the meantime measure the team performance. All right, so great discussion, great insight, Ramesh. Let's look at what some of the metrics are that our attendees who are on the webinar today are using. So let's show the next poll question, which was about what kind of metrics are you using today that you'd like to that you typically find useful within your environment, and then we talk a little bit more about what you can do with Kanban as you start to go on to the next stage of your Kanban implementation. We'll give a few seconds here for the poll to build up. All right, 5 more seconds here and then let's close it out. And let's share the results. So there you go. So as you can see here, so we have some interesting results actually. I would have expected this cumulative flow diagram to be higher usage, but it is actually not so much, whereas of course the average cycle time, lead time analysis certainly taking the lead, and also throughput and velocity. I'm also intrigued to see that there is a fair bit of usage of the blocker analysis and our flow efficiency. That's great. So you guys are certainly more advanced than a lot of the teams that we've spoken with who might typically use the CFD and the average cycle time, but not some of the other metrics that are available in Kanban. Great. So let's take this away and let's continue. We are running a little bit behind. We will try and speed this up as best as possible, but I appreciate your patience if you stay back and be part of this discussion and this interaction. So what next? I guess so. The question for many teams is that I've achieved visualization benefits. I've started to get some metrics out of the system. So what are some of the next things that I can do in my implementation of Kanban? So clearly there are other aspects of Kanban, that sort of deeper implementation of Kanban, and that's something that we look at as to what are some of the things that you can do there. There are some metrics around which are sort of over and above the cycle time and CFD, and some of them were listed there and you're already using that. So that's really great. We look at how you can use these metrics for improving your reliability and predictability. And of course, how do you then look at your Kanban implementation holistically to improve and to maximize the delivery of value to your customers? So some of the concepts of Kanban that take some time for teams to implement. One is, of course, the class of service. The class of service is one of the key concepts defined in the Kanban method that essentially, used along with WIP limits and explicit policies, they really help establish trust between the delivery team and the stakeholder, the customer that you're servicing. Because what it does is it clearly communicates to the stakeholder on the one hand as to what is the team's capacity to do different types of work. And using class of service, the team can clearly communicate to the stakeholder that there is a certain amount of capacity available, and each of that, I mean, all of that capacity can be utilized in handling different types of work. One of the common problems that most teams face is the whole sort of phenomenon of urgent work getting pushed to them, expedited work that gets pushed to them, and sometimes management or customers might believe that they have infinite capacity to take up more and more urgent stuff. And using class of service and defining WIP limits based on the class of service helps not only the team to understand its own capability, its own capacity to do the work, but it also, if it is made explicit on your Kanban board and put there for everybody to look at, it helps the customer to also understand that there is only a certain amount of capacity available to do different types of work, and that one of the most useful discussions that happens when you define class of service and are looking at new work coming in is you are able to have the conversation that, hey, if you want me to take something which is urgent, then you need to be prepared to take off something that I'm already working on. And this becomes, go ahead, Ramesh.
Okay, so as Mahesh said, right, the expedite cards, the common scenario is the standard cost, the standard class of delivery, which should be the majority of your cards. Then there is the expedite, fixed date, and intangible. So fixed date is the date of delivery. There's a deadline, and what it means is from the people who are delivering, they really do want to deliver it before that date. Expedite card is something that's the urgent thing that came in. And there is this intangible class, which is important but not urgent category of things to do. So if we just had the standard cards in the system, you would put all the cards, cards coming through the ready, they go through every queue, and in every buffer wait state, you use first in, first out method for pulling the cards. Life goes on, flow is smooth, things are happening nicely. Now, when you get an expedite card, what happens is this is a high priority card. So every time it gets completed, it goes to the head of the waiting list in the next queue and gets pulled in the first. So in effect, the expedite card is like a VIP, and it gets to bump the queue every time. Waiting queues. The amount of work you need to do depends on intrinsically on the work you're doing and not on the prioritization strategies or whatever. So when you expedite a card, it has an impact on the rest of the system. And that is the card that was waiting, was first in line, just got bumped to being second in line. So what you've done is taken the wait time from a standard card and given it to expedite, right? So the standard card got delayed. So when you have an expedite card, your standard card lead time will increase. So effectively, or you're taking something off or you're moving something out. And therefore, it is generally said that you should negotiate with your customer or your management to limit the number of expedited cards in the system. Generally speaking, they say one shouldn't be working on more than one expedited card at a time, and one shouldn't, number of expedited cards should be in single-digit percentages, low single-digit percent of the total work you do. Now the fixed date, how to handle fixed date delivery. Normally, the way you want to deal with it is you start with fixed date delivery cards as if they were standard cards. Now, as the time they progress, if you use the metric and figure out that the possible delivery date of this fixed date card given standard lead time or cycle time is kind of hitting the deadline or going past the deadline, then you want to start prioritizing this higher and catch up. You expedite this with the next stage and catch up with your buffer and keep doing that so that at some point, if this is still not done, it kind of becomes an expedited card and gets through and gets done on time. Remember here that you have to look at 80% cycle time or 90% tile of cycle time and not the average, because missing a deadline 50% of the time is not considered a good practice, right? So you do that. There is an interesting case to be made for intangible. You notice when we talked about Little's law that if the input rate is higher than the output rate, then the system blows up or becomes infinite width. That there is a notion of utilization, and Little's law holds when the utilization is less than or equal to 1. It's 100% utilization. Now, if you want your system to be resilient and be able to handle expedited card and unknown contingencies and so on, the best way to do that is to have a certain amount of spare capacity that can be redeployed in case something comes up. But having this spare capacity is not a really practical thing if you're spending money to sit on the bench. What you want to do is take up a certain amount of important work that needs to be done but doesn't have a deadline. And you put certain number of people working on it. That's your spare capacity. And if something expedited comes in, you take one of these people and move them over to do the expedited work. And when the expedited work is done, they continue on their important work. So the important work sooner or later gets done. And the total resource is being used 100% of the time while keeping the system resilient and predictable.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So I just wanted to quickly show this. I mean, I think you already sort of talked about this, but basically the cost of delay curve, the cost of delaying something in each of these class of service is different based on the classification of the work, and the fact that you are able to visualize this aspect and show it on your Kanban board, it just makes sure that there is a greater understanding of how work will get delivered and what is the risk of delay in different types of work items that are being done by the team. All right, the other aspect of it, and I think, so before I actually go on to this, I just want to quickly show one more poll question since we talked about class of service. So let's just go ahead and see how many of you are already using class of service. I just want to get that out of the way. Right, another 5 seconds and then we'll close it out. Okay, let's take a quick look at the results. So, as probably expected, Ramesh, nearly 50% not yet using class of service. There are about 40% who have defined the classes service, some of the classes service, and I think many of you who have gone through Kanban training, you have seen the use of the expedited and the standard as sort of the two main classes of service that get used. So you predominantly work with a standard class of service and then have a certain amount of capacity, a limited amount of capacity dedicated to expedited work. And then of course there are a few of you who are much more advanced in the way that you're using the class of service. So this is pretty standard, and as we discussed just now, that as you define the class of service and use them in a judicious way to not only have an optimal capacity utilization of the team overall, but also to use spare capacity when available to take care of things that are important but not necessarily urgent. And that becomes a key way to sort of move forward and use and benefit from the this aspect of Kanban in order to firstly show better overall flow, better utilization of your resources, but also to establish that level of trust and contract with the customer, so that everybody understands better what the team is capable of doing, and what can be expected if an expedited item comes along or a specific type of work item comes along. Okay, so let's take this away and let's continue with our discussion. Oops, I'm somehow having some trouble with my presentation mode today. All right, so the other thing is the other aspect of it, which in this case the audience today is using flow efficiency. Quite a few of you using flow efficiency. In case you haven't, this is something that is also a measure that provides great insight into your system. The flow efficiency, of course, looks at the overall lead time or cycle time on the board, and the wait time and versus the work time, the stages that are built into the overall flow. And it then provides a ratio of go back for a second. It is a measure of the total, a percentage of the total lead time that is spent on actually working on the work item. So it is the ratio of the work time by the total lead time or the total cycle time, multiplied by 100, of course. And it gives you, therefore, a measure of how much wait time is built into your system. Most teams, let me see if I have a chart here. Most teams, if you look at some of the standard Kanban literature that's published, in fact that might be mentioned here in the previous slide. One of the first studies that was published was by Zolt Fibok in the Lean Agile Scotland, and that is as far as back as in 2012, that most teams, good teams as well, are not able to get more than 25 to 40% flow efficiency, which means that 60 to 75% of the time work is sitting in some wait stage of your workflow. This could be a handoff stage from one stage to the next. It could be where somebody is waiting for an external input from a customer or an external team and so on. But work spends a lot of time simply waiting around in your overall workflow, and this metric, flow efficiency, brings that out dramatically. And so if you're not using flow efficiency, you might want to look at that and use it, because one of the key things that we as management typically fall victim to is that when things are falling behind, when we feel that there isn't enough work getting done, we tend to push our teams to work longer, work harder. And in reality, if we were to just look at your flow efficiency metric and look at your overall wait stages built into your workflow and just reduce the wait stages, you would actually get far greater flow efficiency, far greater efficiency from your system than by trying to get your teams to work longer or harder. One of the great insights that Kanban systems provide. So if you're not using it yet, it's certainly something that you should consider using. And it's a very simple measure to take, because it is a direct derivative of the way that you defined your Kanban workflow and the sort of combination of work stages and wait stages. This picture here shows you the flow efficiency that we have seen in the last 6 months. As you can see, we're probably in the same range, ballpark range, about 30 to 40%. In the last few months, we've seen some increase, and then of course there is a downward trend again. Historically, if I look at our data, Ramesh, I think we've been in that same range, probably in the between the 30 to 50%.
Yeah, and again, you see, you can go up higher because we had a lot of small cards being done in that one period of time. Nature of the work changes too from time to time, and that causes that to happen. But the key thing what you want to do is this is a good measure to look at a particular class of service. Flow efficiency depends on the class of service you have. Intangible cards will have a low flow efficiency. That's by design. And an expedite card should have a flow efficiency of 90, 80, 100% kind of range, right?
Absolutely.
So when you have a standard card and the flow efficiency is low, you want to look at that wait time and say, why did it happen? In order to improve your consistency of your delivery in the standard class, you really want to care to control the wait time more so than the work time, because each piece of work takes what it's supposed to take to get done in terms of effort. But there is no reason why it should be waiting longer than others.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right, let's keep going. I'm going to sort of quickly go through some of these slides because some of these are probably being used quite well already. Blockers, the use of blockers as a way to indicate to the team that there is a problem with some work that's being done and that the person who is blocked needs help is, I think, a fairly common usage of the Kanban board. You want to be able to highlight the fact that there is some work that's held up because of some problem, and then the whole team is supposed to swarm and help the person remove the blockage. What is perhaps not maybe being done, and something that at least Kanban facilitates you to do, is to look at the blocker and do some analysis of the root cause as to why these blockers may be happening, and more importantly, how much time might be being lost to these different reasons why work is getting held up. So this is an interesting analysis that you can probably do quite easily if you've set up these reason codes for why work gets held up, and look at how much is it costing you to see these blocks, and take corrective action as needed in order to reduce the amount of blocks that go on in the system. In addition, of course, there are other metrics that can be used. Some of these are already being used by many of you in the audience today. Some that may not be being used and should certainly be being used. The reason to look at these metrics is also because these help you in a very simple and straightforward way look at your performance and be able to make forecasts about your future performance and what you can deliver to your customers. So let's take a quick look at how you might do some of these things. The cumulative flow diagram, Ramesh, is probably one of the easier ones to use for extrapolating what you can do and what kind of delivery can you commit to.
Yeah. So as I said, the slope of the cumulative area is the rate at which you're completing the work. And so if you want to know how much you'll complete in the future, what you can do is project that rate forward till the amount of work you need to do gets completed. So this is the most straightforward way of doing prediction, and the black box Monte Carlo simulation and all other statistical techniques, what they do is allow you to do the same thing but in a little more robust fashion, because this throughput line is very sensitive to the start and the end point or outliers and so on and so forth. And doing more advanced techniques will fix that. But in concept, this is how you extrapolate the system to find out how much more work you're going to get done.
Right.
So therefore, improving the slope of that curve is really getting improvement in your whole overall system. Okay, just look at it differently.
Correct.
Velocity, increasing velocity, improving the throughput is really key to greater delivery.
And in Swift Kanban, we have actually a couple of ways that we can use the CFD to predict how long will it take to complete the work that's in the backlog today, and that's what this screen is showing you. But also you can look at if you wanted to finish work by a certain date, then what is the required throughput, what is the required velocity that you need to get in order to complete it by that certain date. And that's again a straightforward projection that the CFD in Swift Kanban provides. Two of the most useful charts that I find are the throughput. One is the throughput velocity chart, which is by month, and the other the same view that you can generate. And this is something that you might be doing manually or through a tool. The other is by whatever your cadence of delivery to your customers might be. And in our case, we do releases every 4 to 6 weeks, and we are able to plot the same chart, the throughput chart, by release or by month. And these two charts provide a very quick and easy, dirty way to say that on average, what is the amount of work that you're delivering on every month, or in the next case, in every release. And in our case, for example, we can probably say that we are doing about 20 work items. We're delivering 20 work items in each release. And again, you can plot this by the mix of work that you're doing, and because that again represents the reality of what your team does, and you're able to therefore easily look at the picture based on just a few months of data and be able to forecast as to what is the kind of work that you can commit to doing in the future, just looking at the throughput or velocity chart. And the other thing, of course, is, so one is to look at the overall work and be able to say this is the total number of things that potentially we could do. The other aspect of the way that your team works is to look at the lead time distribution. This is again something that many of you who've gone through who played the Get Kanban game might have plotted this manually. And what this does is tells you a distribution of the lead times for different cards that have been completed by in the system, and give you an idea of what is the different levels of confidence at which you can say that any given piece of work that you get will be completed. So as you can see here in this chart, that probably a maximum amount of work has been done in perhaps 1 or 2 weeks. These two bars indicate that. And so you can, looking at this chart, you might say that, hey, it looks like a lot of my work gets done in this time period, maybe between 1 and 3 weeks. But if you want to give a very high confidence factor, say 90% confidence factor that the next piece of work that comes, I will get done in a certain amount of time, then you need to look at a bigger chunk of your data and say, okay, perhaps I can say with 90% confidence that within 9 weeks, I will certainly be able to complete a piece of work, whatever be that work item that you get get asked to do. So the lead time distribution gives you a great way for you to say or to make a commitment about any work item that comes to you with the appropriate level of confidence that you can look at based on your lead time distribution chart.
The other thing to note is that the lead time distribution is by its very nature a long tail distribution, right? It's got a long tail, and there are reds which are basically more than 3 sigmas away. The key to improving your system is to minimize the number of reds in the first case, and to make this system as heavy on the left as possible and tail as small as possible. And if you do that, your predictability goes up, your flow will improve. I mean, this is really a health chart. The longer the tail, the worse off you are.
Absolutely. In fact, this is actually a great way to highlight these outliers, because some of these will affect your average cycle time calculations very heavily and negatively. And this is one great way to look at what these outliers might be, and at least take them out in terms of your normal prediction and forecasting. But as you rightly said, the idea is to make the band as tight as possible and to keep them to the left of the chart in order to have a greater control on the amount of time it's taking for your team to do any given piece of work. All right. So overall, what is the takeaway from these charts that we've seen, Ramesh? Any overall thought on in terms of how do you look at these various metrics that that a Kanban team can use and improve its predictability, improve its ability to forecast what it can do in the future?
I mean, I think the as you say, fundamental to all of this Kanban is arrival rate, departure rate, throughput. Departure rate is throughput, cycle time, which is this chart, right?
Mm-hmm.
So and the mix of cards, and those are your sort of measurements, and controlling the whip at the right places to make the flow more continuous, reducing the blockings or other causes that cause the cycle time distribution to have a long tail, right? If you keep your people 100% deployed on useful work, you reduce the whip and you control the variability in lead time, okay, you're in heaven, basically. So
Right.
so the actions you take to make these happen can be varied and context dependent, but if you look at it next 3 months chart, cycle time chart, and it looks like it has much better tail, you have improved.
Yes, absolutely.
I mean, breaking the cards into similar sizes and using this. So there's a laundry list of things to do.
And actually, that's something, the card sizing keeps coming up as one of the other factors that people worry about, that how much of sort of the reliability of the Kanban metrics is based on how well sized their cards are, or how evenly sized they are.
For those who have played no estimate game, right? It's clear that card sizing and lead time are not very tightly coupled. So if you're within an order of magnitude, you're all right. The thing that is important is more uniform and granular the cards are, right? The smaller the pieces that flow through any system, the flow becomes more smooth, right? Your estimates cycle time estimates may not change, but the secondary effect on the smoothness of the flow actually does improve. So one
Right.
shouldn't get very kind of obsessed about card sizing, but let's not let an elephant and a mouse go through the same thing. That's really the case.
Absolutely. Also, I suppose that in a stable system where you have a fair bit of data, it should be easy to slice and dice and look at similar items together and look at the metrics for those items together rather than for the entire data set, perhaps.
For example, if you do t-shirt sizing, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then you can look at a particular t-shirt size. But what you don't get is, I have all these medium cards, and suddenly in the middle of them sitting is an extra large card, right?
Right.
That extra large card is sitting in a work queue. Somebody is working on it, which means that he's missed 5 simple cards to work on.
Correct.
That is where the flow becomes turbulent. I mean, one car stalled on the freeway and the freeway backs up, right?
Correct. Absolutely. Great example.
And that is why breaking cards into things that the system can handle smoothly.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a truck, it could be a mini, but it's within that range, right?
Yeah.
If it's too big, it becomes a challenge. And if it's too small, the transactional cost is too high.
Too high, exactly. All right, so let's look at the last sort of slide here and look at what are some of the things that the team sort of hope to get as they use Kanban, as they try to speed up their time to market, and also to maximize the value of that they're delivering to their customer. And certainly Kanban helps in a variety of ways as they improve their flow and reduce cycle time and get faster delivery. They're able to get faster feedback from customers and therefore be in sync in agreement with the customer on what is being delivered, or if something needs to change, then they can act on it more quickly. I think the visual and the collaborative nature of Kanban has a dramatic effect on the way that teams are able to work with the customers to ultimately deliver the right set of products and services to their customers, which is something that traditionally non-visual systems have lacked. And of course, it provides a mechanism for continuous delivery and feedback that helps the team to continuously course correct as needed to deliver the right set of things for their customers that the customers are looking for. So let's take a pause here and I know that we have run over time quite a bit, but I am sure there are some of you who are still there and might have some questions. So I'm going to throw open the floor to the audience, and if you have any questions for Ramesh, please go ahead and use the question box and ask any questions that you might have. Ramesh, in the meantime, so there is a question that came up earlier. I'm not sure that Jim is still on the call. I think he still is. So the question was, when does a Kanban team do the equivalent of a sprint review and a sprint retrospective? It seems like these two events are missing in Kanban's continuous delivery model.
So basically, okay, Kanban, okay, if you're in the software world and you're using Kanban, that doesn't make releases go away, correct? You still do releases, at least in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do get to the nirvana of continuous delivery, you can still have a cadence for retrospective or improvement meetings, Kaizen meetings, right? So basically, it is up to you. If you do releases, then synchronizing it with releases makes perfectly good sense. Otherwise, what you should be doing is putting in a discipline that once a month or once every so often, depending on your context, that you will take a retrospective look at what happened in the last period and what adjustments and tunings you want to do. It is important to, from time to time, to look at it and kind of continue on your continuous improvement journey.
Mm-hmm. I was also going to say that I suppose Kanban's original sort of tenet about doing what you're doing, continue to do what you're doing today, and start with visualization and start with implement. That's sort of the starting point. So if you're a Scrum team and you're doing sprint-based work and you're doing sprint reviews, those would continue, should continue as they are. And as you start to realize some of the benefits of Kanban or get some of the insights that a Kanban board will provide, you will then start to make changes to your process as needed, and if required. Yeah.
And again, if you are in a company where a lot of other people are still doing sprints and you're doing Kanban, and you have to combine the two, mm-hmm. You will effectively complete work, and at some point that batch of work will get merged into other work, and so you still have that cadence, and so you might as well use that cadence to continue your review meetings.
Right. Let's take another question. This is a question from Renata Amara. I hope I'm pronouncing her name correctly. The question is, how would you get the best out of the Kanban board for a team that doesn't share any common responsibilities? We are afraid of Kanban turning into a personal reminder system.
A team that doesn't share common responsibility. Can you clarify? It's a team of. I mean, I'm having trouble understanding the question.
Okay. Yeah. Let me see if I can give the mic to Renata here. Renata, you can go ahead and speak on this on the call, and we should hopefully be able to hear you. Maybe they are not able to talk on the call here. Let's take another question in the meantime. Well, this is a question more about Swift Kanban. So, does Digité have a free trial online? Yes, there is a free trial of the software available for you to try, signing up for yourself and learning about the various features of Kanban. Go ahead, Ramesh.
So, going back to the last question, I think what it might be like in many sprint scenarios or
so there is a clarification here, Ramesh. So they're saying you're a group of 4 people on the same team with the same job role, but we own specific applications which cannot be shared with coworkers. We do the same job but for different applications. So each of them essentially is doing an individual role, playing an individual role, supporting a particular application.
Right. In that case, you basically end up having 4 value streams, right?
Right.
And yes, it is. You are using your value stream, and you get the benefit of visualization in terms of collaboration and communication. But yes, there are many aspects of Kanban that really, team and resource allocation stuff doesn't apply here.
Right. So you're right that there is more limited benefit if you're the only one in your value stream, only one in your Kanban board working on a system or supporting an application. In a way, it kind of becomes like a personal Kanban system. My assumption is that in addition to supporting that application, you might still have other things to take care of, perhaps both personal as well as professional, and it might be worthwhile to think about having all of your work on that same Kanban board, but of course may not be practical or feasible given your context. So that's certainly that's something to consider. Another question from the audience: in the world of Agile Scrum, there are many different ways to do large-scale Scrum. Less and say for example, how does Digité approach large-scale Kanban? You want to take that?
So yes, I mean, Mahesh, why don't you take the Swifties thing?
Well, so I was going to first talk a little bit about Kanban, and I think I have seen and heard a couple of people explain it really beautifully in terms of how Kanban can be applied to scale. If you go to our website, you will be able to find a webinar by Klaus Leopold, one of the early Kanban thought leaders, very well regarded in the Kanban community. And we did a webinar I did a webinar with him, I think beginning of 2016, and he explained it excellently, and I think it is also echoed by other people. He said that basically apply Kanban to the highest level of workflow that you want to act or you can in an organization. And you start with applying Kanban to that level. So let's say it could be something at a portfolio level or at a program level, whatever be the context in which you're that you're operating. And when the team feels the need to drill down into any particular stage, you then drill down and create a lower level Kanban board to track work being done in that stage. And so you start at the highest level and you build the hierarchy as needed for tracking lower level of work, and very quickly you can have a set of Kanban boards that let you scale from very low level work or rather very small pieces of work at a task level or a to-do list, for example, to tracking very high levels of work at portfolio and program levels. So his whole approach was that Kanban can be applied at any level, and you can drill down both the upwards and downwards, and also use sideways, depending on how you want to include an overall workflow which impacts your team's own workflow. So using just standard Kanban principles, you can apply it to any level. David Anderson has talked extensively about using Kanban and being able to have connected Kanban systems that let you apply the Kanban method to any level of the organization, and therefore you don't really need anything different from a scaling perspective. You just apply the standard methods of standards or principles of Kanban method, and you're able to scale it and look at your overall organization and the interdependency between teams and their impact on higher level work items, strategy and vision level work items. Just by the way that you start with doing something at the high level, at the upper level, and then breaking them down into the low level. So if you just take that webinar, you will actually have a really you'll find it really interesting.
Well, in addition, Mahesh, if you look at the SAFe particularly, which I have looked at it carefully, a very large part of SAFe upstream management, which is managing stories all the way down till they get assigned to a specific team, is very much a Kanban centric story. And at the time it goes to the team, there is a freedom of how you want to deliver it, as long as you maintain the art cadence, right? So a Scrumban plus Kanban portfolios is starting at portfolio and coming down is pretty close to implementing SAFe, at least.
That is true. And in fact, if you look at SAFe in particular, with the version 4.5 of its framework, they have incorporated Kanban at all levels of the organization. So right from portfolio all the way down to team level, you could be using a set of Kanban boards to define your hierarchy, define your work breakdown, and then to manage it in a synchronized way. So just to respond to that question and talk about what Ramesh referred to earlier. Last year we launched a product called Swift Ease, essentially for people who are using SAFe in particular for running their scale agile initiatives. We felt that two things. One, we have, with our deep experience with Kanban and the way that we've seen it being used to scale in such effective manner, we had that experience to be able to do something like that. And the second was I think the adoption of Kanban by the Scale Agile framework and the popularity of the SAFe method overall. All of those reasons went into our decision to launch a product that specifically addressed the requirements of SAFe implementation teams. And so we have Swift Ease. That's a product that's available now, and it's only being used by a number of pilot customers, and we've got some really great response to it. But anyway, that's a separate discussion. I don't want to make it a product pitch here, but we've certainly seen some interesting interactions with customers implementing SAFe. One last question. I guess we are way over time, but I will take this last question here. Have you ever seen an organization use the Kanban portfolio drill down ability with benefits realization management and benefits dependency maps? I'm not quite sure what you, so Ramesh, I'm not sure I understand what is benefits realization management.
Yeah.
In relation to benefits or?
No, so at least we have seen people using portfolio board and drilling it down. And
yes,
all
absolutely.
But I don't know that benefit realization map kind of stuff. I mean, our product doesn't have it, so I haven't seen anybody use it.
Right. Maybe, Jim, this is a question that we could take offline and get into a little more detail here. We will provide, there's a question here, so we will provide the slides to all the attendees of today's webinar. So yes, absolutely, there will be a follow-up email where we provide the recording as well as the slides. So with that, I think we have 45 minutes over time. I think this is the first time that I've done a webinar, Ramesh, which has taken so long, but I think the topic itself resonated with a lot of people. And I hope that this discussion today has helped you in some ways to progress further on your Kanban journey and to use your existing Kanban systems more effectively. And if there are any questions that have not been taken up, please do send it to us. Let me go ahead and share our contact information here. Here you go. And we'd love to hear from you. And we, like we said at the beginning, we will be doing a couple of more of these sessions where we'll go into more details and some more sophisticated analysis that we have worked on in the last several years. Ramesh has been instrumental in it, and it is also packaged as part of our enterprise services planning module. We're doing some really interesting things there, so we hope that you will join us for the next session where we get a little more deeper into forecasting and using specialized statistical techniques for getting better at forecasting using the data that you have. With that, we'll end the webinar here. Thank you all so much for staying back, all of you who did that, and I hope that you enjoyed the webinar. Ramesh, thanks very much for a great discussion, and I look forward to the next one where we will hopefully run into some of the same audience and also meet some new people. Thanks a lot.